Hello, my friends. This is Rick, and this is your seat at the table. We are looking at the Middle-earth city of Minas Ithil. All right. It is a beautiful and tragic story in a lot of aspects. Of course, from Tolkien's works and his notes and things that we have access to, we don't really know a lot about the place. We know that it was the city of Gondorian, that it was created as a sister to Minas Tirith, which was the city of Isidore, because the sister of Minas Arnor, which later became Minas Tirith. It was not really intended as a guardian fortress to protect Mordor, although it did serve that purpose because it sits right next to a major pass that leads into Mordor proper. It's not really located in a great area for agriculture or things of this nature, although the province of Ithilean, yes, I know, I have pronunciation issues. I'm not going to, it is just me. I can't, 54, I can't fix that. The thing is, the city was a city of arts and culture of High Normer and of early Gondor and the men of the West. It represented a soul to the heart of Gondor, as where you want to look at Asgiliath being the heart of Gondor or the mind of Gondor, and Minas Arnor being the heart, however you want to look at it. The city served a lot of minor roles from my understanding, and then early on it was the first major city to fall to the Dark Lord's forces after Angmar had decimated over centuries of conflict in Arnor, basically brought Arnor and its subsequent little kingdoms to their knees. He lost the last battle, so he fled, but he didn't lose the war per se, because where did he go? Short time later, he shows up outside the gates of Minas Ithil with the rest of the ringrests and an army, and so on and so forth. It's such a significant loss and such a difficult location that Gondor never is able to retake the city for a number of reasons. The sheer amount of forces that they would need to have done so would have further decimated their own military forces and the capabilities of the time. Second, the city really didn't need to be reclaimed. It was just not in the Gondor's best interest of the ruling kings of the time, and then the stewards, to retake the city, considering the sheer amount of problems doing so would bring. At least this is my personal opinion on that particular subject. And even at the end of the War of the Rings, when Aragorn pretty much after the war has the city dismantled. He forbids anybody to settle within sight of it. There's so much evil, sorcery, and other things that are attributed to the city of what Minas Ithil becomes in its latter centuries, that it was just deemed not salvageable or worthy of the effort. Aragon had plenty of other places to go and things to do and places to rebuild, or to at least begin the rebuilding of, and this was not one of them. So when the writers and designers from Iron Crown Enterprises sat down, I can imagine that they took what kernels they had to work with and expanded. They did a good job, in my opinion. They got a significant size source book out of it. It is a companion to this series of the Middle-earth cities. Minas Tirith is another one that they created, and I have that one in a hardback. Sadly, they did not have, because this would be like the second in the series, obviously, and they intended for more, but as we know, the contractor, the license expired, something went down, Iron Crown lost it, what have you, and I don't know that any other company since has tried to expand on it. Perhaps the second, third edition stuff that I've got a few things on. I went down a couple weeks ago at my job and borrowed the Xerox machine to print a physical copy of the J.R.R. PDF. Good Lord, that's 300 freaking pages, or dang near this. That's a stack of paper, front and back this big. It's much bigger. It's ironic how you can publish something, or you can print something in a PDF form, and it takes up a much thicker stack of paper than what it would have been in a book form. So anyway, so when we look at Minas Ithil as a supplement for the game, there is a lot of great and valuable information in here. This is generally not a place that if you're campaigning after the city falls, you're not likely to go here for good reason, because it is the home base of several of the ring wraiths, including the Witch King. The player should never really, in my personal opinion, be in a position to be powerful enough to take those people on. Not ever. And if they are, then something's not quite right. But we get our introduction. The city of spires. The Cities of Middle-earth series presents Game Master's detailed overviews of the most famous and significant cities in Tolkien's world of Endor. Like I said, I believe that they intended to have a whole series of them. And we have a variation on Pellager. We have Arnor, of course. We have Tharbad in a much smaller form, but those are adventure modules per se. Nothing as in depth as this. But if you look at the large cities, there's not a huge amount of large metropolitan cities in the West. There are a few, but they're not large in number. There are far more of them in the East, and could have been explored in deeper depth over time, but that's typical of many game systems. Very few game systems get the legs that D&D did and has had, and the resources that they've had available to them. So using Minas Ithil, a temporal setting, and it says here, possible to use information in the modular role-playing game set at any time period from the start of the Third Age, the fall of the city, to the Nazgul, and Third Age 2002, with only minor adjustments to the printed material. Basic layout, etc. This particular map comes with it. This is it's two maps that technically overlay each other a bit, which was kind of a strange take on how they usually make their maps. So, but it was, as you can see, it's in pristine condition for me, just because it's been in the source book. I have not had a lot of use. I've not made use of this particular book that much. Mostly it's just for my personal entertainment, for reading purposes, because I've never had a campaign set in Middle-earth that ever came anywhere close to Minas Ithil for one reason or another. It just wasn't something that propped up. So we get history of the city, Second Age, the Kinstrife, the Plague, fall of the city. We get a tale of years, which you'll note isn't very much, because there really isn't much to work with. We have the land, the terrain. This is Minas Ithil's at the head of the valley, guarding one of the few passes into the land of Mordor. This pass, called the Cirith Ithil, has long been regarded as a gap in the fence that holds the horrors at Gorgoth out of the fertile lands of Ithilean. Higher in the mountains, parallel to Cirith Ithil, the dread narrow pass known as Cirith Ungol, what's named Cirith Durth. Yeah, anyway, so flora, agriculture, wild plants. It says here the land's close proximity to the city have never been cultivated extensively by Gondorians. Only hardy plants such as radishes and potatoes are grown in the Morgul Vale. Other vegetable products, including grains, fruit, and timber, are carried into the city from other parts of the Ithilean and as far away as Anorian. It's just not, the ground's not suitable for a number of reasons for growing any kind of large-based crops. And I imagine any garden-based stuff would take a lot of tending, a lot of fertilization, importing soil, things like this. It says later that they talk about the biggest bulk of agriculture would be in sheep, herding and sheep, the wool industry, domestic fauna. Yeah, it says Residents as a whole are fond of pets, with cats and birds preferred to dogs, which are regarded as rural beasts, blah, blah. The rat population has multiplied since the Great Plague, but yet not a major problem. Outside, the sheep graze in abundance, with a few head of cattle also present. Herds of sheep provide the city's principal source of income, and they are well tended by the farmers in the valley. The war horses of the garrison also roam the narrow valley in times of peace. Grazing animals populate the valley so densely that roving party orcs once used them for cover to approach a farmstead within sight of the city walls, giving the rice a popular Gondorian expression in orc and sheep's clothing. Right. Excuse me. So, wild fauna, climate, cultural lifestyle. It says here, the people of Minas Ithil consider themselves a step ahead of the rest of Gondor, and consequently the world, in virtually all areas of culture. This attitude filters down to the most aspects of daily life. Other Gondorians, especially those from the practical Minas Tirith, the Ithileans, desire to remain offbeat as a particularly rude form of arrogance, but it is the nonconformist nature of the city's inhabitants which grants Minas Ithil its rich culture. Even the stoic Dinadane feel free to express their innermost feelings and emotions among the fountains of the main avenue. Named a city of passions by a poet, Minas Ithil is favored honeymoon destination, etc., etc. So, like I said, this is the cultural heart of Gondor in its earliest days. There's museums and venues for poets and for singers and entertainers. Bards are prolific in the city. The main tower actually is divided into sections based on eras of human growth and development. So there's lots of scholarly things going on in the city as well. We got customs and etiquette and dress. Says people in Minas Ithil are less reverent towards the tradition than their brethren in the West. Nonetheless, certain patterns in food and drink. There's a lot of base back information, spiritual life, art, and high culture. Says here, throughout northwest Endor, Minas Ithil is known as the center of arts, surpassing all save perhaps the elvish havens for the beauty and emotion captured in the works produced here. The people of Minas Ithil do not understand the attitude of their brethren across the Anduin, who view art as an investment or at best mere ornamentation. Most highly revered in Minas Arnor are the works of the Numerians, or the works done in imitation of them. So let's just pause for just a brief second. It's implied over and over again that Normer, it was the height of human endeavor and advancement and technology until well into the Fourth Age, or well after the Fourth Age. So the fact is, it's Tolkien's version of Atlantis that crops up every now and then it sank. But at its peak, the Numerians were second only to the elves when it comes to intellectual development and surpassing dwarves when it comes to engineering and construction. And they used magic in many applications. So if this was the pinnacle of human development of that era, that their culture, their arts and sciences, all these things would be also significantly advanced, and then it would diminish. And then so the survivors of some of that artistic talent end up in Minas Ithil, and during the early golden years of Gondor are able to continue, or at least parrot, much of that cultural heritage from Normer. So with the loss of the city, the loss of that element, Gondor is diminished in yet another way. Yes, there's artists and there's poets and there's bards and so on and so forth in other places in Gondor, but none have the sophistication or the connectivity to Norma as the residents of this particular city. Something in my, it's just my thought on that, right? So when it goes into on poetry, which I'm not a big fan of, nothing wrong with it, but anyway. And we got the peoples of Minas Ithil, the Gondorians, the noble houses, a couple specific houses within them, the great houses, which are secondary to the noble houses, the guilds and how they apply, the artists and societies. Here's the Royal Secret Order of the Froth Blowers. hardly secret and certainly not royal. The froth blowers are a fraternal organization open to men of age of 40, over the age of 40 only. Their meetings are feared by the other townsfolk and guard alike, for they usually include a night-long romp of drinking and infantile shenanigans. Members impress themselves with delusions of their own power of significance. They hold few secrets other than their handshake and Quenya phrase of recognition. So, right, the Sisterhood of the Veil, the Cabal. Says a town such as Minas Ithil is bound to attract a large number of users of magic. Most are associated with the university, and the clerks are within Tara to replace any type of formal mages association. Unknown to these, even the sages, though, a society of magicians is formed among the women of the city. Some members are also affiliated with the university, but all are sworn to keep their membership secret. And that's another thing, and I've said it before in other videos. Magic in Middle-earth is different. Traditionally speaking, if you follow the actual tenets of what we know of how Tolkien approached magic, you can see just how reluctant the handful of real wizards are to actually throw that stuff around. You know, you don't see the sort of magic battles and magic applications that you do in the traditional fantasy or sword and sorcery setting. But obviously, we take a license with that because a lot of us who play these things enjoy that aspect. So there's kind of a wink and a nudge that allows for a much more expanded use of magic in Middle-earth. And it helps if your settings are far enough back in the Third Age or even the Second Age, where it's much more likely to be prevalent than it would be by the time we get to the War of the Ring, when human practicing of magic is very low-key or non-existent from the book perspective. Anyway, so we talk about other inhabitants, including the non-Dunlanding. It says that a big chunk of the garrison is staffed by Northmen, people from the northern Anduin and Dale and so on and so forth, for because it's a good avenue for making a living, finding a place to live, and eventually integrating oneself into Gondorian society, etc., if that's what you want to do. But traditionally, it's just there are a lot of overpaid mercenaries if you're going to go from that aspect. Commerce and industry, resources, export and trade. As again once said, there's not a huge allotment of stuff directly in Minas Ithil other than culture. You know, reading materials, song, dance, perhaps some limited clothing, luxury items. Wool is its primary export. There's not even enough wood in the region to export that for the shipping industry for Gondor. Although, because Ithil more or less oversees Ithilean, there are a lot of resources that come out of Ithilean, but not through Ithilean by way of Minas Ithil, which would be kind of backwards. You would go to Anduin and to Osgiliath or Polygur, more likely, or other trade ports along the river. Anyway, exports of trade, markets and conventions of trade, politics and power. Remember, most of the settings for gameplay in Middle-earth from Iron Crown Enterprises was set in Third Age 1640. A few years after the plague, and then quite a ways before the ring takes place. We still have what's left of Arthedain in Arnor, so Arnor kind of still around. We have aspects of pretty much everything in the books, but Rohan hasn't been created yet, but we still get Northmen coming down from the south, etc. So in this case, the particular year, the king of Gondor and his queen were kind of on the outs, and the queen chose to go to Minas Ithil because I guess officially she's kind of the caretaker of the city, whatever. It says, an embarrassment of Minas Arnor prompted a drastic change of political affairs under the Tower of the Moon. The unhappy marriage of King Tarador and Mirian of Nan Rakal, Requeen, is well known throughout Gondor, etc., etc., etc. A well-kept secret is the love that King harbors for Fimaglaral, a half-elven maid from Ithilda and Holland. Well kept, blah, blah, blah. Until Marion discovered a letter her husband written to his paramour. Rather than bring humiliation upon the royal house, Queen decided to take more direct hand in her royal responsibility. She left within a week from Minas Ithil. Tongues wagged freely, but so far no one has guessed the truth. So, The Queen arrived in Minas Ithil late in the year of 1639, anticipated at leisurely time, discovered the city was rife with corruption, etc., and set out to fix it, and enter the potential characters and so on and so forth of this era. Now we got the steward of Minas Ithil, the Argon, her who's the seer of the city. Keep in mind that one of the basis for Ithil is the Ithil stone. There is a stone in the tower until the Nosgoths take it. The council of the city, the nobility, the guilds again, the university, enemies of the queen and the city. We got orcs, other managed kingdoms, the spider cult, the enemy within. This is foe to Minas Ithil, no force arms will ever conquer is the slow and steady decline into despair brought on by the plague and ominous presence of Mordor. Once the dreamers Gondor looked to Minas Ithil as a hope of the Dinadan, where art and beauty might overcome the menaces of the shadow. Now, however, the myth of Minas Ithil loses its credibility daily. It's becoming more and more apparent that the people of Minas Ithil are prone to human drives of greed and jealousy as any in the kingdom. Only the scholars and artists cling to their ideals. So you get an idea that's setting the tone post-plague and pre-conquering by the Nazgul. Relations with the rest of Gondor, internal politics, the Gondorian army, the garrison organization, weapon and tactics, role of the garrison, a city overview. So the grim locale of the Morgul Vale provides a sharp contrast for the splendors of the city secluded within the cleft. Minas Ithil was originally a fortress since its site chosen as a bulwark against invasion from Mordor. Although the city still serves in that capacity, the Dinadan turned it into a place of beauty and marvel as well, a shimmering white oasis in a valley filled with blacks and grays. The sight of it has filled the hearts of many a weary traveler with hope and inspiration. The city rests on a well-defended shelf of solid basalt known as the Lad Mithid, player Greystone. Towering over the south side of the city is the Ramergon, or the Shadow Wall of Stone, a sheer cliff hundreds of feet tall. This precipice forms the base of the Mount Celebris, the summit of which one might clutch the gleam of Osgiliath or Minas Arnor at sunrise. The steep slope of the Lad Mithod, called the Berg Gorad, or the Giant Step by the locals, etc. So it's still a formidable location. It's nothing to sneeze at. The walls, the Twilight Gates, the Dawn Portal, the Rival Shrine, flanking towers, Tower of the Moon. Rising above the roofs, the rest of the city, encrusted fantastically with frivolous ornament, Minas Ithil draws the eye of all walking the city streets. Not quite as majestic as Anorian's spire in Minas Arnor, the Ithil Tower radiates a different sort of power. The elaborately carved structure seems delicate as lace and one of the strongest evidences of the realm of Gondor, and shows no sign of age. Built on the orders of Isildur, the High King never lived to see its completion in 3rd Age 32. None questions that magic was used in the construction, but the details of the building are lost in the currents of time. Almost pure white marble, ancient enhancements strengthen the rock to be harder than iron. The tower stands an impressive 220 feet, not including the 75-foot tall artificial mound holding its foundation. Primary mass of Minas Ithil rises in harmony with the companion towers fused to its flanks. High atop the structure, an observation terrace offers an unparalleled view of the Morgul Vale. In the center of the platform, a great lantern mounted on a pivot enables the watchers to direct a narrow beam of light in any direction they desire, even to Osgiliath, from where the beacon might be seen on a clear night. Although strong, the Tower of the Moon is less a citadel than it is a symbol of the hopes and dreams of all Gondorians. Inside, Minas Ithil contains the relics of a museum and shrine. The tower gracefully rises, white and luminous, overcoming the dark and gray veil, reaching upwards to embrace the stars. It is the home of one of the Plantari, and the citizen sees it as a font of wisdom, not a place of strength. Entry to the tower is denied to all save the Queen, the Stone Warden, and her deputies, except on special occasions. We have the quarters, the quarters of the city, Queen's Quarter, Quarter of Coins, Quarter of Wells, Quarter of Shadow, street, sewer, and public works, institutions and buildings and notes, the Queen's Quarter, the Tower of the Moon, the Queen's Palace, the University, the Ithil Stone itself, the new Council Hall, the Guard Fortress, Hospice of Colmorwi, a noble house Telegar, a noble household, house of Americano, etc., etc., the Black Swan Inn, etc., etc. So we start getting into through some of the guild halls and things like that. Stuff that you tend to find in a fantasy, large fantasy city location. Various temples. We got some takes on the Kinstrife, Ithil and the Kinstrife. Few changes were made to the city in the years between the 15th century and the Third Age and the year 1640. The Tower of Black Sorcery, the Fourth Age. Yep, and the Fourth Age. Prince Familial ruled wisely and asked he would, and he and Owen graced Ithilean with their sagacity for the rest of their days, save for one journey to the land to the Shire in the north. The city of Minas Ithil fared less well, demolished thoroughly. The stones of the tower were used to build the prince's new palace. The Palantir of Minas Ithil was never found, presuming missing in the fall of Barad-dûr. The Morgan Vale, a settlement sprang up quickly on the banks of Ithian, raging places, etc., etc., but the city itself never was re-inhabited and was demolished. So we get into things like the NPCs of the particular story and adventures that are set within the book, personalities, the queen and her deputies, the steward, etc., etc. Picture of the queen, a sorceress, numerous NPCs, so on and so forth. So then we get into the sections like adventures in Minas Ithil, and I'm not really going to go into all that because there's a lot here. We also get the breakdown of the tower and several key structures, gatehouses, things like this, layout of the tower itself, keeping in mind that it is much more a social and cultural shrine and museum than an actual fortress, although it is quite fortified and is capable. The fact that you have to consider that what kind of forces came against it at the time that they did in order for the city to fall. And it didn't just fall overnight, by my understanding. It took a minute, but there was no way to go relieve the siege, and you're dealing with, it was a dress rehearsal in some aspects for the grander attempt to take Minas Arnor centuries later. But there you have it, Minas Ithil. It's a very nice, a lot of useful information, possibly good location for playing a campaign. Like I said, I personally have not done that with this, but I have enjoyed reading it numerous times, and again so recently. So there you have it. Till next time.